Tennessee. Take her downtown. Gonna have a big time tonight. Ohio River rolling on and on. Sit down on your banks and I write a river song underneath that moonlight. Gonna have a big time tonight. Western Kentucky is my home, here I'll die. But I ain't dead yet, I'm still alive. Gonna have a big time tonight. When God made the earth, he had a master plan. First he made Kentucky, and he called it his own land. River towns, barbecuing, horse racing, mountain air, corn, whiskey, bluegrass music, and that girl from Tennessee.
I want to thank Erik Nordberg for agreeing to share this project with us. When he and I've known Erik for a long time. He's an old friend, and we suddenly now find ourselves in the same part of the world for the first time in many years. As those of you know who study history, there really is no history without records. We can have stories, we can have legends, and we usually end up with myths. We need to have reliable records, and records are fragile, and they can easily be lost or damaged. And so a survey of this magnitude for 21 counties in West Tennessee to go out and find out where the records are, what kind of condition they're in, how they're being housed, and develop a database that can be useful for researchers, but also for down the road for projects to do digitization, which is a place. I did it when I was the director of the Clark Historical Library at Central Michigan. We did a lot of microfilming of old newspapers and old records. Thousands and thousands of images every year. We had two 35mm cameras working, each one 8 hours a day with student workers. And now all of that is old technology. Everything now, luckily microfilm can be digitized easily. But now we have a new age of digital records, and I think all of these things will someday be candidates for that. It's also always good for me to see younger people involved, because everyone's younger than me these days. But to see the young people, so the next generation of historians, or people interested in history who care about history, getting involved and doing something that's really valuable, something that's original, gets them out in the field to meet. I'm sure you met some interesting people in the course of the project, and looking forward to hearing about it. We would ask if you are interested in getting more information about our group, that you sign in on the table there. We also have our other programs for the rest of the year. We have a workshop on Irish genealogy done by a group from Ulster in a couple of weeks. And there's some other information on how to contact us. You're welcome to take a planner. Our distribution plan for the planners didn't work out very well, so we have lots of extras. and it's getting to be kind of late in the year, but if you still need a 2023 planner and a pen, help yourself. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce a man who needs no introduction since this is his building, Erik Nordberg, the Dean of Paul Meek Library. Erik.
So thanks so much, Bill. As Bill said, we've known each other a long time. We first met in the early 90s in Michigan, and when I came here to Tennessee, he's been a good supporter and a friend, and the work that the Jackson Purchase Historical Society is doing is just wonderful. Not only these kind of events, which are informative and useful in learning, and now through the live stream of these events and the recording so that they're documents that others can access, but the continuing publication of a journal, which becomes harder and harder now in our environment for people to successfully do. I want to welcome people here today. This is not my building. This is UT Martin's building, and certainly for our students, it's more their building than it'll ever be mine. But we're fortunate to have a really good campus here, a very nice library building, and a very good special collections department. So we're happy to have you here today. I would invite those that are here in the audience to spend some time afterwards. We've got a couple of exhibit spaces here in special collections that reflect on some of the elected officials from the region, former Governor Ned Ray McWhorter, former Congressman Ed Jones. And we also have a traveling exhibit that's here in our museum space on civil rights history throughout the region in the 1960s. So please be sure to have a look at that. And if you're joining us online, that exhibit's going to be here for a few more weeks. So please come by and say hello. You're getting good bang for your buck today. We have 6 speakers throughout our presentation. We didn't want you to feel as if you were coming and not getting your money's worth. Oh, wait, it's free today. I'm going to walk through some slides, and then we'll turn things over to others that are speaking today. I'm going to give a quick overview about the planning of this project and the grant funding that we got. Sam Richardson, who's our Archivist and Museum Curator, is going to walk through some of the project components. He was the principal investigator on this. And then we have 4 of our 5 students that worked with us last summer and throughout the year that are going to talk a little more specifically about the things that they did and some of the places that they visited. Just as a background for this project, when I arrived here, I didn't know a lot about Tennessee and certainly not about West Tennessee. And so it was interesting for me as a former archivist to kind of look at this region and try to figure out, okay, how do I learn about the history of this area? And of course, as an archivist, I was real interested to see where records are held and how people do research in this area. So we decided that we were going to look at a project to focus on historical records. And when we say that, I think we tend to focus on things that people can use to conduct various types of research. That might be a historian who's looking seriously at some aspect of regional history, agriculture, Civil War, settlement, maybe legal history that need access to records, but also an increasingly strong use of historical records in genealogy and family history. It also occurred to us that access and discovery of those records was important. So a little bit of background for us then, because we're at the University of Tennessee in Martin, we're interested in obviously this little spot where our main campus is, but we also have a mission as a university to provide access to education and learning across the West Grand Division. So that's the area between Tennessee River and the Mississippi River here in the state of Tennessee, or as we like to call it, river to river, covering that entire area, which is really 21 different counties in this part of the state. The university also has a presence elsewhere on this. We have 5 different regional centers that operate in West Tennessee. Gives us a little anchor in different communities. And if you haven't heard yet, this big blue oval is going to appear soon. The Ford Motor Company has announced a major construction project to build a brand new assembly plant, and they're partnering with a North Korean battery manufacturer to build a battery plant. So this area is really the breadth of what we do as a university. And so not surprisingly, as Sam and I talked about it, we wondered, gee, what could we do to do some work in this region? We decided that a survey would be a good start. You know, a lot of people want to jump into digitization projects or grant projects that might preserve materials. And we thought, well, before we do any of that, we have to kind of figure out where stuff is. And so a baseline survey was going to be what we wanted to work with. It'd also be a good opportunity for us to network with other agencies that are doing this work to understand what we might do collaboratively together. And so we decided that we needed money. So we went to the National Endowment for Humanities, which provides a lot of different funding for all sorts of different arts and culture projects. They also do support libraries and archives and museums in the work that they do. And your federal tax dollars have been at work here on this project, so thank you for those that are still paying taxes. We appreciate that. Part of what happened during the pandemic, as you may recall, is that a great deal of money was put out in COVID relief funds for various things, some of it to save lives in hospitals and various places. But there was also money that went to agencies like the National Endowment for the Humanities to try to support organizations that were struggling during the pandemic, some of the museums that were closed because they couldn't allow people into their structures. And so we had a look at one of the many projects that they had, the American Rescue Plan, and we discovered that there were elements of this that were worried about agencies that were, as they said, adversely impacted by the pandemic. And as we had been talking to some agencies in the region, we realized that some of these were museums and libraries and archives that were struggling a bit because they didn't have their normal operations. So we applied for a grant. We suggested that we would do a survey of the places that held records, and also that we'd try to figure out, gee, if any of them had closed or were in danger of closing, so that we could be sure that other agencies might be able to come in and help them through that period. And lo and behold, we received a $126,000 grant, which is not a lot of money in the big scheme, but it was more than enough money for us to undertake a number of different things that we'll talk about as we go along here. Just as a piece of the element of what we were looking at, our project was focused on a rural area that's often overlooked, but we felt was significant. Yes, this is a rural part, an agricultural part of the United States, but really you don't have to go far to discover deep roots of history in this area: agriculture, transportation, Native American history. We have a very strong clay mining history in this region, as well as all the things you would normally expect of small towns, regions, larger cities in a place like this. We also realized that a lot of the agencies that were holding records had minimal budgets. Many of them are operating on volunteer staff, and that many are in historic buildings that are aging and have their own challenges for just preservation of the building themselves. So what we decided to do in our project was that we were going to try to accomplish four things. We were going to do the survey, and the survey involved, as we'll hear shortly, both some advanced work, but then literally some field work to go and visit places. We were going to do some basic assessment of whether records were at risk in those locations, so we could identify some places that might need some help. But overall, we were looking for this survey and the directory that we published from it to lay the foundation for potential collaborative work in the future. So that's kind of the overview that's there. I'm going to turn things over to Sam. He's going to talk a bit about the activities that we have. But basically, the money that we had paid for personnel costs, our temporary employees, students that we had. We had a project team. Marv Downing's here, provided some input to our project as we went along, as well as Dr. Catherine Carls in the UT Martin History Department. We had supplies that we provided at a couple of little workshops. And then the directory itself will do a limited print run. And we also then were able, with a little bit of spare money, we're going to have a convening on April 15th down in Jackson, Tennessee. And at that gathering, we're going to give away 50 disaster response kits. This will be bins that have disaster supplies, one for each of the first 50 agencies that come. We were also able to capture what they call indirect costs that help to kind of cover our expenses just internally, computers, electricity, that kind of thing. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Sam. He's going to talk a little bit about the project activities, and I'll let him up, Sam Richardson.
So our project activities, of course, was first we had to figure out, we had the design of a database, how we were going to design it. And then, of course, we had to do what was our initial data gathering. And we did that in many different ways, from doing emails as well as the internet. We called people, those kind of things. And then we were going to go to summer field. We were going to have summer field trips, so that to find out whether the data that we were receiving was correct. And so we wanted to go to these places and just basically ask questions to them. Plus, the summer field trips were also to find out if there were more organizations that we didn't find over the internet, and go there and ask them questions and follow the same questionnaire that we were using. And then we had 3 disaster response workshops throughout West Tennessee. Invited organizations, archives, museum people to these workshops, and I did a disaster response workshops. And then designed a directory, and then have this spring conference that we're going to be having on April 15th. Okay, so how are we going to design this database? What information did we want to gather? Did we want to be included in the database? Well, of course, the name of the institution, the location, its location, where is it at? Because what we were looking for, and we have a pretty good genealogical room here at UTM, and we do have a number of genealogists that come to UTM to use our West Tennessee Heritage Study Center. And so, but we don't have everything that's across West Tennessee. We try to get just about as much as we can, but we don't have everything. And so when you get a genealogist looking for something, where are they going to go? You know, what areas, where can they find these places that have these records, that have these documents that they need? And so we decided, and plus it would help me when I do go out to try to find items to put in our West Tennessee Heritage Study Center, that I know who to contact and who to, because you have genealogists creating all kinds of documents and books and things about doing genealogy in West Tennessee, and we try to purchase them and try to get them here at UTM. And so we wanted also the contact information, so they know who to contact, the hours that these institutions are open, the types of collections, whether they're municipal records, family history, genealogical, oral histories, historical artifacts, the number of collections, and what they considered were their top 5. What they felt were the most important collections that they had, as well as whether they are a historical site or building. So one of the first things we did was hire a graduate assistant to help us out with this. And our graduate assistant, Elisa Duke, well, actually, she's not working on her MBA. She just graduated with her MBA. And she started working with us on February 2022, over a year ago. What she was tasked to do was locate the institutions throughout West Tennessee that may hold historical and genealogical data. So she used the internet, just searched the internet for these institutions, as well as we talked to people. If we found, got in touch, we asked more people about what these institutions are. Then she was to make an initial contact of the institution to gather their data, and then create a database and directory of these institutions with their relevant data. So that's what her job was.
We're going to let her have the next slide there.
Okay, you want to do the next slide?
Thank you. The data that I had gathered of institutions, they are libraries, historical societies, museums, and churches. I have contacted these people. I started out with the Southern Baptist Convention, and there were over 600 churches in Western Tennessee as I put them down, and I was later instructed to narrow down to just the headquarters of each denomination, except the Church of Christ, which they operate independently and autonomous. I have made contacts with the headquarters, including Southern Baptist Archives in Nashville and Cumberland Presbyterian Archives in Cordova. They have not responded. And even individual churches, most have not responded. I've even reached out to the Episcopalian Diocese of West Tennessee in Memphis. The secretary had responded and stated that they have not had an archivist since the beginning of the pandemic, so it has been closed since. And other than that, what Sam had mentioned earlier, when I have located these, I have placed a pin on the map so we would know where our team would go to find this information. And I also sent these institutions a questionnaire to fill out so we would have an idea of what collections they have. And now I would turn this back over to Sam.
So what type of institutions were we trying to include in the database? Well, historical, is there any type of institution that may hold historical genealogical records or manuscripts? That can include, of course, the churches, museums, libraries, courthouses, historical societies. And once an institution was discovered, Alicia would research to find an email and or contact number and, like she said, place a pin on our map. And that's this map right here. It's back there in our office. And then she would send the questionnaire via email to gather the data. And if there was no response to the email, she would contact the institution by phone if possible, if she could find a phone number. Okay, so then came our summer field trips. So we hired 4 interns for our summer field trips. And within the grant, we planned to visit each of the institutions that we were going to include into the database. And the goals for these summer field visits were to confirm data on the return questionnaire. So if we did get a questionnaire, we wanted to go back and confirm whether it was correct or not. To gather data if questionnaires were not returned. So we would try to find where these places were, and if they never did return the questionnaire, then the visits, they would go there and ask them these questions. And then locate institutions that were not on our list. For instance, sometimes if you go to a town, you go to the local public library, you ask, because we didn't find a historical society in the town. They would ask the librarians, is there a historical society? And they said, oh yeah, this is who you need to contact for that. And so we were able to even find more institutions for the directory. So we sent them out. We had 4 interns, and we sent them out in 2 teams. They confirmed data and took pictures of the institutions. They visited over 110 different locations all throughout West Tennessee. And they're going to explain all of this, and actually I think you're going to enjoy what they have to say probably more than what we are saying, actually, because they really actually got to get out there and get to meet people and talk to people, which is the most fun. And they got to go to places that were really just amazing and fantastic. And I think what you'll find when they give you, and I might be saying something they're going to say, but what I think they found was how dedicated some of these people are to these institutions. Volunteers that work a lot, work days a week to keep these institutions going. And when they went in and actually started asking them about it, how excited they got that actually there were people who were interested. And not just, old people, these young people coming in and being interested in what they had. And they, them showing them around and talking to them about their collections, as well as museums and that they just love to show them, talk to them about what they had and their history of those organizations. And then, of course, we had our disaster response workshops. If you remember, there was like 3 major natural disasters that happened in this area over the last 2 or 3 years. From the tornadoes that hit Dresden and Mayfield, and the floods that occurred, and we had 3 natural disasters within this area, and the effects of COVID as well as the effects of COVID, archives and cultural institutions, and so we thought, what would be a good part about this program was to have disaster response workshops throughout West Tennessee. And so we did 3 disaster response workshops, one in Somerville, one in Parsons, and then one up here. And that went all, went to the West Tennessee, Southwest Tennessee, East Southwest Tennessee, and then of course up here at Northwest Tennessee. And so that covered the topics in the, disaster topics like, building a disaster, writing up a disaster plan, what you should have in case of disaster, and I showed what goes into one of those disaster tubs. We have one, and I showed them what they should have in case of a disaster. And so what is the directory? Well, when finished, we'll have at least 111 entries. I think we actually have more since this has been put up, of historical cultural institutions throughout West Tennessee. It will be organized by county and type of institution, and it will come in 2 forms: a database that will reside on the Paul Meek Library Special Collections Archives webpage, as well as a paper directory that we plan to give to public libraries and historical institutions that reside in West Tennessee. And these are our interns. This is Elijah Davidson. You guys want to stand up? Grant Bivens. Rio, you don't only see her eyes, so when she stands up, you can actually see what she looks like. That's Rio Krosno. And Dan McDonough, who is not here at this time. And they're going to be coming up, and whoever wants to come first can come up.
So earlier, Mr. Sam kind of maybe shot down the whole thing I was going to speak about, which is dedication and the fields that we went to. But, after COVID wrecked most of West Tennessee, especially the archives, historical societies, and libraries, we saw, firsthand the struggles that these places had, even if they were funded, through county, state, anything like that. But also the people that were unpaid, volunteers, people that didn't have the funds, and didn't have the help that some of the other places that were privileged that did have those things. And one of the best examples that I remember is in Bolivar in Hardeman County. The archives here, which is in this old building, the basement is flooded. Half of the building gets condemned, basically. But there was a little old lady, she probably came up to here to me, Miss Sandra Kelly, and she was really dedicated to keeping this thing open to keep the archives of the county and of the region, basically, because there was nobody else that, was taking charge of it. And Miss Kelly definitely exemplifies dedication and diligence to keeping the history of West Tennessee alive, and it's people, I'm sure all of you know the dedication that it takes. You might not have the help or the funds, but you're dedicated to it, and that's what keeps it alive. Another place that we had that I wanted to talk about was the Gordon Browning Museum. I think Dan was going to speak about that. I'm not sure if there's a picture on here. I don't know if I want to fool with this. Okay. Okay, you want me to come back, or? Okay. All I wanted to say basically was the dedication that all of you have, I'm sure, and the places that we went to have. It's what keeps the history of West Tennessee alive. Because being from here, we don't think, especially younger people like us, we don't think there's much going on. But, if you go back and look at what happened and what continues to happen, we can learn from our past to make our history, our future better. That's all I got.
Do I just press this? So today I'm going to talk about Palmersville Historical Society. Me and Grant went to go visit Miss June Kemp, and it was really, really hot outside. So Palmersville is really small, almost non-existent, and it felt like we were in the woods when we pulled up there. And we had to make an appointment because it is run by Miss June Kemp, and I'm pretty sure she does most everything there by herself, so she has to divide her time. They had some really interesting items there. Some really significant ones that we saw was an original schoolhouse that they saved from being torn down. It was on the campus of their high school, and so she went in and she was like, "No, give me that building." And in the schoolhouse, there were also school books from the late 19th, early 20th century, and a lunch bell that they would be like, ring for children to come get their lunch. They also had another building on the site. It was the Palmersville Telephone Company from 1935. Inside of it was the original switchboard, and it was really interesting because half of it was done up like living quarters, and then the other half was obviously the telephone company, and I just thought that was really interesting. And then in a back room, she was hiding these Masonic portraits and records that she had rescued from the Primitive Baptist Church that was also going to be demolished. She wouldn't let me look at them, which was sad. But I really liked Miss June Kemp. She was very passionate about preserving all of the artifacts. It was really interesting to talk to her because she was just so knowledgeable about all of it, and I really appreciated it. Another place I want to talk to y'all about is the McNairy County Archives. It's located inside of an old courthouse. The archives, like itself, is just shoved into this room that's like probably the size of this back here. And it is just piled like floor to ceiling with shelves and records and books and all of it. And there's like open pipes. It's just like, I'm like, this is scary. But the courthouse itself was also really cool. Am I talking about the right thing? Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So they also had the office of Buford Pusser, and he's a pretty famous guy. You'll probably know who he is, walking tall. And they also had an old jail upstairs, and we went in this really rickety elevator up there, and there was all kinds of art on the walls inside the jail. I thought that was really cool. And then the last place is Scotts Hill City Hall. It was ran by Mr. David Austin. All of us went together that day. I think it was one of the last places we went to. So we met with Mr. David Austin, and he is the town historian. So when you first walk in the main office, there's glass cabinets with a bunch of artifacts, and there's old phones. somebody found like a message in a bottle inside of a brick when they were redoing the street. But then, like, they have this vault in the back, and that's where all the really cool stuff is. So there's photo albums of people who lived in the town, newspaper articles from the 1890s, including this one, which is about Egyptian mice. Thought he looked pretty cute, so I included him. And there were also diaries from various locals. Like, I don't know, it was just really neat, little time capsule back there. And I really liked it. That's all. Yes.
Hello. So I'd like to talk about PT boats in the museum in Germantown in close to Memphis, Shelby County. This woman by the name of Alice Guthrie, she runs it basically in addition to another staff member that they have. And so Rio and I went to this location, and she showed us around, showed us where she keeps the files about the PT boats, and showed us some PT boats insignia on the walls. And the whole time I was thinking, what are PT boats? So I asked her what PT boats were, and it was just so crazy because the way her eyes lit up and how invested she was in that story, because her father was in the military in World War II on a PT boat. So it's just, I don't know, it's how much this woman's identity was tied to what she was doing. It was just crazy to me. And another thing that I thought I couldn't help but think is that she didn't look to be in great health. She had a oxygen tank hooked up, and she had cannulas and a mask on. And so, you know, my thought when Rio and I left, I was like, what's going to happen to this place when somebody like her isn't here or isn't around anymore to take care of it? And so, you know, you just think when you meet people like this, you think we need younger people. We need younger people involved to keep this kind of thing intact with that same kind of passion that she has. That's what I got for there. And then I'd like to talk about the Fred Culp Museum in Trenton, Tennessee, Gibson County. I don't want to talk about the teapots yet. But the place that was attached to the Teapot Museum that I'll talk about in a second, that's where they house the Fred Culp Museum, but also the woman who runs the Fred Culp Museum also runs the archives there. And she talked about, well, she briefly mentioned an author, a local author in Trenton by the name of Jesse Hill Ford. Do any of y'all know who that is? Local? You do? Okay. He wrote a novel about, well, it's really a candid portrait of racism in the South, and it was kind of revolutionary for his time. And he was pretty well renowned for it at the time, but it came out later that he actually murdered a black man in that town and was acquitted for the crime later. And so as an English major in college, I'm doing my capstone next semester, and I am going to focus on that work specifically that I found at that museum and that archive. And I'm probably going to go back there to find research for my paper there at that location. But yeah, I just thought the teapots were cool. It's the world's largest teapot collection that was attached to this museum that we went to. I've just never seen teapots like that. Isn't it cool? Pretty cool. Okay, that's what I got. Who's next?
You can go to the next slide. We're going to skip that one. There you go. Let's leave that.
Okay.
Grant, you want to talk a little bit about it?
One of the most exciting places that we went to this summer was the Gordon Browning Museum. And I can tell you, if you go there, you will spend a good 2 to 4 hours, depending on how much you know, I guess, speaking to Mr. Brent Cox, who runs this museum. Once again, mostly by himself, unpaid volunteer. And he puts his whole lifeblood into it because his father started the museum. And from here, we can see, the guns, being kind of a historical nerd, I guess, or whatever, I thought it was interesting to see original guns from World War II. We have captured flags from the Germans. He also had a lot of Japanese captured flags. And in between talking about all this, Brent Cox would talk about Gordon Browning, which is a great governor that Tennessee had that we don't really talk about, in school or anything. He was really close with FDR and had a lot to do with World War II. And in between talking about Gordon Browning and guns, Mr. Cox would also talk about his rock and roll days. I guess that's a whole nother story or whatever. But again, I think in Mr. Brent Cox, there is a dedication and a lot of time and effort that he puts into running this museum. And even though, you know, the basement was like a medieval dungeon, and some of these rooms in the back weren't kept up too well, you know, he still goes in there probably, you know, 3 or 4 times a week on his own time to make sure, you know, if anybody comes into there, that they leave knowing something about Tennessee or Gordon Browning or World War II. And Mr. Cox and Miss Kelly, they really represent, you know, the best that we have in the west of Tennessee, I think. That's all I have on that.
And the last one that I wanted to be sure we didn't forget to cover, Dan would have done it if he was here, is our very own Weakley County Archives. It's an arrangement that the state of Tennessee has that if a county comes up with a formal plan to care for its non-current public records, it can apply to have a separate archives facility. There are a process to go through to do that, and Weakley County worked through that process. And then also the county attaches a fee onto a lot of the document registration that happens at county offices. So Weakley County Archives now has a physical facility away from the courthouse. Departments can arrange to transfer non-current records from their offices out to that facility. And with the money that they've captured, they have available to them enough funds to pay a part-time archivist. Denise Bone is on the left there. And the state also provides a training opportunity. They do an annual archives training that individuals can attend. You have to go through 3 annual cycles. They have different content each year, and you can become a certified records person from the state. So I think it's good that the state is focusing that kind of energy on that. Yes, ma'am?
Is it similar to what Stewart County has in Dover?
I would guess that it probably is, yep. And I know that the archives, we can't cover everything today, but there's a beautiful archives and local history collection in Henry County in Paris, which operates similarly. If you visit their reading room, that's really more the historical society part, and across the hallway they have the older county records. And so a lot of the activity in Tennessee does happen through these county archives along with these other museums. But to wrap up a couple of things here with some observations. First of all, as you've heard from our summer interns, so much of the benefit, I think, of this entire project was the interactions that occurred between the different agencies, between UT Martin certainly and these agencies formally, but I think the fact that we had people on the ground coming to look at things and interact, and I think as we heard earlier, that many of the people who were making the contact were younger people interacting with some older volunteers and staff that were there. If we had challenges in this project that I'd warn others who want to do a similar project, it can be very hard to get response from the agencies. Alicia certainly encountered that. And so as far as gathering information on who held records, it can be kind of hard when people don't respond to surveys, don't respond to telephone calls, don't respond to email. And although we were able to locate many of those agencies through our field trips, I still feel that there's probably some agencies that we weren't able to discover. So a project like this is really never done. But I think as we've heard also, one of the great strengths of this network of communities is that we've got very dedicated volunteers at many of these agencies, and we've got very dedicated employees at county archives and in county municipal offices as well as city offices. These are people who are very committed to their community history. Yes, it's wonderful that special collections departments like ours or at the State Library and Archives collect the so-called important records of important things. The reality is that most of the record of American history is held by small agencies at the county and local level. So we did see some of these that were suffering from limited support. We certainly didn't want to call them out today. But records collections with visible mold outbreaks in them that need to be addressed. Some facilities that obviously were exposed to cold and damp and basements that weren't secured. We heard tell of other spaces that we didn't get to see that were in attics. So the challenges are immense for all of these organizations, and I think we need to continue to be supportive of these groups. Part of the work we'll do on April 15th will be a grant writing workshop, and we'll have members from Humanities Tennessee there. They offer support grants to programming, but also give out information about the Preservation Assistance Grant Program that the NEH provides, as well as a program called MAP that the Institute for Museum and Library Services provides. So I think trying to get people prepared for grant writing is always useful. There's money out there. We got some money out of this, out for this project. The remaining steps for us are, of course, the directory. We can talk about that a little bit more before you leave if you're interested. And as I said, we preserved a little bit of money out of the grant spending during the year, so we were able to redirect that to actually give away some disaster response kits for agencies that are here in the West Grand Division. We'll do that at the April 19th spring conference. And I guess if nothing more, as we move forward, this will provide the baseline for some other work that we can do. We have an interest here at UT Martin in digitization of records. We have an initiative that's been underway for several years where we've been digitizing some materials that people can access remotely. I think it would be an idea to work with other agencies that don't have the capacity to do that to see if there are ways that we can digitize more things. I was in Pennsylvania when the pandemic hit, and I remember that many people who couldn't leave their homes suddenly decided doing online research was something they wanted to work on, and particularly family research. And I had a coworker who actually had a family tree limb that came through Alabama and discovered that some family member had written a 500-page history of everybody with that name, but there was only one copy. And it was held at this one library in this one small town. The library was closed with the pandemic, and they were not in a situation to photocopy it because it was so large and mail it to this person. So I think those kinds of stories, I think, can help us to see a future where digitization and access is important, but I think we also have to support these agencies. It's not just that we digitize stuff and then they close. We have to be attentive to that. So that concludes our remarks today. I want to thank all five of us that were here today for their work, and Dan, who couldn't be with us. But maybe you could give just a quick round of applause for this group.